Hi, welcome. We're going to get started shortly. We're just waiting for a few folks to join us. So we'll get started in a minute or so. I see folks are joining us here. Hi, welcome. All right. All right. Well, I see folks are joining us, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Before I get started, I'm actually going to add in the chat box the link to the workbook for today's workshop. Not sure if you all got a chance to download that ahead of time, but if not, I'm going to paste the link in the chat box so you can participate as we go along. I pasted the link in the chat box for our Ikigai workbook. So that'll give you a chance to not only just record some of the information that you gained today, but also start to brainstorm the answer to your Ikigai. But before we even jump into that, I love when I start this presentation asking the folks who are participating if they even know what an Ikigai is to begin with. So for those of you who are here with us live, I'd love if in the chat box you could let me know if yes or no you know what an Ikigai is. This is a term you're familiar with. So I see we have a couple people here. Could you just let me know in the chat box if you know what an Ikigai is? Yes or no? I'll give it a few moments to see what, okay, some no's. Okay, well, no problem, because by the end of today's presentation, you'll not only know what an Ikigai is, but you'll have some amazing information to help you figure out what your Ikigai is and how it relates to your creative path, your passion, your purpose, and potentially your college major. So I just want to start off by introducing myself. My name is Brandy Keeler. I'm the Assistant Director of Admissions here at the College for Creative Studies. And I'm super excited. This is one of my favorite workshops and presentations to do. And at CCS, our whole mission at this college is to really help students who have that passion, that interest in art and design, figure out how to take that passion, that interest, and transform it into a career path, a calling where you get to do what you love for the rest of your life. And so finding and pursuing your creative path is what our school is all about, which is why we offer this workshop. A quick note before I get into the information for today's presentation, I'm going to turn my camera off because we have a pretty visual presentation, but I will turn it back on at the end of the presentation for Q&A, but I promise you I'm here the whole time. So let's go ahead and get started. All righty. There we go. All right. So Ikigai, because no one's heard of this term before, it's a Japanese word. So don't feel bad if you've never heard of it before. Ikigai is a Japanese term meaning a reason for being. It's why you wake up in the morning. It's what makes life worthwhile. In English, we typically refer to an Ikigai as a purpose, but the Japanese have a very specific formula for how to figure out your purpose. And we'll talk about that shortly. But myself, as somebody who's really passionate about helping people find and pursue their highest calling, I'm just obsessed with this concept of Ikigai. For the last decade, actually, I've been mentoring and coaching and advising students and adults on how to identify and pursue their unique purpose, specifically creative people, right? Working at CCS for the past 5 years, I've had thousands of conversations with students about how to pursue their unique purpose and how to create the things that they want to make in their life and find value doing that. So before I get into the details of how we can identify your specific Ikigai, we're going to talk a little bit about why it matters and what it looks like in practice. So why does Ikigai matter in the first place? You're like, I might be in high school. I might be interested in transferring. Why do I need to know what Ikigai is at this point? Well, I don't know how many of you folks here have heard of the 80,000 hours theory, but there's a theory out there that we spend on average 80,000 hours of our lives in our career, right? That's a lot of time and commitment to one thing or a few things, right? And as a young adult, specifically as a high school student, figuring out what you want to do for the rest of your life at 17 or 18 or even 20 years old can be a really daunting, intimidating task, right? That's crazy, right? But then you add to that task the assignment of choosing a college major and a college to invest 4 years of your life and thousands of dollars to pursue what you want to do. Then you've got a list of choices that go from being really exciting to really overwhelming and anxiety inducing sometimes. In fact, according to the National Center for Education Statistics, about 80% of students in the US end up changing their major at least once. And depending on the school you attend, depending on the path you choose, changing your major can actually add more time to your college path and end up costing you more, right? And for some students, that means larger student debt. So it can impact you even outside of college, right? And so the concept of Ikigai, of these questions I'm going to ask you soon, is tremendously important for helping you figure out how to pursue your college education in a way that provides more clarity and confidence about the degree path that you choose, right? Because it's my goal, and mostly everybody in CCS's admissions goal, to save you time and money and make sure you're pursuing the path that is most relevant to where you want to go in your career, right? So let's take a look at what an Ikigai looks like. This is what an Ikigai looks like, right? So your Ikigai is this little star, the answer that lies at the intersection of 4 questions. What do I love to do? What am I good at? What do I feel the world needs? And what can I get paid to do, right? And it's important that you're asking all 4 of these questions and not just 2 or 3 of them, because of several reasons, right? If you're doing something that you're good at and you love it, but you aren't doing something you feel the world needs, you can look up in the middle of your life and feel like what you're doing is useless, right? I don't know if you all know any adults who've had midlife or quarter life crises, but I can tell you they are not fun, right? You want to make sure that the work you're doing is impactful and meaningful to you. But you also don't only want to do what you love and what you feel the world needs. That's called volunteer work, right? If you're happy and fulfilled, but you can't pay the bills, you won't be able to allocate enough of your time and your energy to the things that you're really like mission oriented and passionate about, right? Because you need to eat, you need to keep your lights on, right? And so it's really important that as you're pursuing your college path or your career path, your creative path, you're thinking about all 4 of these things, because we want you to have the resources that sustain your life so you can continue to create. We want you to create things that you love, using skills that you have, but also making a difference in the world in a way that matters to you, right? If you're only creating for yourself, it's probably not art, because no one else is going to look at it, right? If people are going to look at what you're creating for someone, right? Even if it's something with your own vision, your own statement. And so it's important to really think about all 4 of these questions. So now I want to talk about some examples, just quickly, some examples of alumni from CCS who have followed their Ikigai. And I want to start to help you after that explore what yours may be, right? So I'm going to show you a few examples of alumni, and we're going to look at their specific Ikigai answers and how it relates to their current career path, all right? So again, hopefully you download the workbook. You can follow along in the workbook as we talk about a few alumni examples, starting with Todd Smith, right? And one thing I want you to notice in these examples is how some of these answers are seemingly unrelated, right? I know for Todd Smith, he loved both sports and arts, right? And I'm actually going to read a direct quote from him about pursuing his path. He said, "For as long as I can remember, there have always been 2 constants in my life, art and sport. In school, I was constantly yelled at for drawing too much in class, and regardless of the weather, I was always outside kicking, throwing, or chasing a ball around. Eventually, I realized my passions could become a career and that Nike could be the perfect destination for me to pursue both of them at the same time. So after graduating from the College for Creative Studies in Detroit, I moved to Oregon and made my goal a reality. Simple as that, really. 19 plus years later, I'm still here chasing after my original childhood passions day in and day out. Lucky me, right? So if we look at like what Todd loved, like it's something he's loved since he was a kid. This is actually him as a kid. Like he's always loved soccer. It's not a mystery that would be a part of his life, right? But he knew that he was really good at creative thinking and design. And that's something he grew his skills in at the graphic design program here at CCS. But how was he going to marry those things, right? That was something he found in the practice here at CCS. And so it's allowed him to work in many positions at Nike, including as the global football equipment senior designer, right? So he was designing balls and shin guards. They actually have a field that he was able to play on. He coached kids, but he was also using his design skills in an industry that mattered to him. And he still to this day mentors young designers who also have a passion for sports. Next is Veronica Scott. I think her Ikigai example is really powerful because she actually discovered her Ikigai while she was at CCS. I'm going to actually play a video of her in her own words explaining how she discovered the difference she wanted to make in the world using what she loved to do, because she knew she loved art and design, right? She knew that's why she was going to CCS. And she liked creative problem solving, but she wasn't sure what difference she would make in the world until she was getting assignments to help her figure that out.
This all started off as a class project out of College for Creative Studies here in Detroit. And I was studying product design at the time and ended up getting my degree in product design, so no fashion background and no experience in sewing. And this was a class project out of a studio. And the whole point of the studio was to design to fill actual needs rather than design pretty, shiny, fast things that ended up becoming trash, and how to actually fill needs with products. And so I ended up spending a lot of time on the streets in this area, specifically in a shelter called NSO. Having the people on the streets be a part of the design process became really important, and then eventually realizing that the coat itself didn't really matter. Because really a coat is a Band-Aid for a bigger, more systemic issue. And I only realized that when going back to the shelter with this finished coat sleeping bag, and at the time wasn't exactly the sleekest thing in the world. Going back to the shelter with this coat, there was a woman that actually ended up yelling at me. And she's saying, we don't need coats, we need jobs. And she was entirely correct, because a coat, like I said, on its own doesn't amount to much, but it has far more impact when it can affect the people in the community in a way of not just giving them something, but helping them stay employed and really employ the people that were going to receive the coat in the first place.
When I first came to the empowerment plan, I, was homeless at the time, and now I see a lot of people with the coat on, and I tell them, I stop and tell them I'm happy to see it on them, and I made that coat, with the company that makes it, and they thanks me. They said, it's really warm, and it's like, wow. So, it's a blessing. I look at it as a great blessing.
We only hire from shelters, because usually the people inside of those shelters are pretty much blacklisted from a lot of other jobs, and they're really not valued as much as they should be, and seen as somebody that can learn and grow and rise to a challenge and come out the other side even stronger than when they started. So we hire for multiple different reasons, but these are the people that are not normally given that chance to apply for jobs. And I go in there saying, this is your opportunity for a clean slate. One of the things I enjoy the most is seeing the transition someone makes when they first start with us to the person they really are. Everyone we hire is kind of in a survival mode. They're not sure where they're sleeping at night. They're not sure where their next meal is going to come from. They're not positive about any of that. So they're living kind of from moment to moment. And they're still also out there looking for jobs and looking for employment, ways to get in money. And that person has pushed all of their actual personality, who they are, down so much to just survive and to take care of their family. And so seeing somebody come in and they're always very quiet, and I can tell you this is the same for everyone on here, you don't, like, oh, everybody's so quiet. They're very dedicated to the job. They want to prove that they're not going to fail, that they're worth it, that, it was worth taking a risk on them. And I don't think of it as a risk. I think of it as a great investment in someone. And so they're so quiet, and then a couple months as we go on and as we give them that opportunity to make mistakes and not have it be the end of the world or the end of their job, they start to open up a lot more, and then the personalities come out. And then the hair gets done, and the nails and the clothes, and all of a sudden there is this person again with an identity that is theirs and not in survival mode. Never in a million years did I think that a class project I did while going to school, it would ever become a business, let alone anything that actually had a real lasting effect on anybody. To know that the women feel more stable and that they can offer and provide a better life for their kids, that they know where they're going to sleep at night, that know they can feed and clothe their children, that they're going to have a meal ready for them when they come home from school, and know that they can get them to school, are all things I'm so happy, and I wouldn't have even believed years ago if you told me that I could have done.
So I love Veronica's example, right? Like she said, she didn't even believe that was, she didn't know what she'd be doing, right? What her path looked like. And just to share, like context wise, the impact of her Ikigai on the world, the empowerment plan, that company she started with just 3 workers and some small seed funding from CCS Connections, has rapidly grown to become a $4.5 million enterprise. Now, over 50,000 coats have been distributed to people in need across the US and 20 countries across the world. And to date, her organization's more than 95 hires. She's been able to hire 95 individuals from homeless shelters. And she has gotten each and every single one of those individuals to move from shelter into permanent housing within 4 to 6 weeks of starting work at her company. And not a single person has fallen back into homelessness, not even during the pandemic, right? That's the power of her creativity. That's the power of all of our creativity, right? And among her many accolades, Veronica has been the youngest person to win the JFK New Frontier Award. That's an image of her in the top left receiving it. And Carolyn Kennedy said that she's changing the world one coat at a time, right? So this is what it looks like, right? To do something you love, using the skills that you have that make a difference in the world. Oops, don't want to repeat that. All right, next is Rachel Elise Thomas, who's one of our photography graduates. She just graduated in 2019, has already been making a huge splash in the photography world. She's a documentary photographer and a collage artist that uses her art to explore African-American life, culture, and tradition. So she, as a collage artist, has had her work published in magazines, right? And because she's also an editorial photographer, she's had the ability to tell stories in a lot of different ways. So she's a very versatile artist. So her personal work, she assembles images and materials in a way that really encourages her viewers to take a deeper look into the messages she's presenting. And she's talking about all kinds of things that are important to her that she thinks people should have conversations about, like overconsumption, vanity, materialism, colorism, sexism, racism, right? To date, she's actually been published by the New York Times, New Republic, Rolling Stone magazine, The Marshall Project, In Style magazine, and countless other publications. But she also has the great satisfaction of having her fine artwork exhibited in galleries. She's actually been a part of 2 artist fellowships and 2 artist residencies programs, one being WDET's recent initiative where they were documenting how people were surviving the pandemic. She's telling powerful stories, but stories that are things she's also passionate about talking about, right? And living a successful life doing so. A lot of folks know about Yoda. His mom went to CCS. Her name is Wendy Froud, and she's a doll artist, sculptor, and puppet maker. But she's best known for fabricating Yoda for the 1980 film Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back, right? And this is something she started doing shortly after graduating. She was working for Jim Henson. She actually did puppets for classic films like Dark Crystal and Labyrinth. But her passion for fantasy stories and for fairies, that didn't just start at college, right? That's something she always loved, right? When you ask her what she loves, she has loved doing this since she was a kid. She actually started making dolls when she was just 6 years old. Now, did she have the skills that she had that led her to the industry? No, her degree helped her with that. But the passion was already there, right? And then when you ask Wendy, I've read different interviews and listened to different interviews of hers. When people ask her about how to live a life well, like how to be successful, her advice is to find something that you truly believe in and wish to share with the world. And she just so happens to really believe in fairies, so much so that she lives in her own castle in England. Her husband also draws fairies, like she just lives in this fantasy world. It's something she gets to do and also makes a living doing, right? Another great example of an alum, and this will be my last for the evening, is Jason Maiden. So growing up, Jason was obsessed with Jordan shoes, and Michael Jordan was one of his icons. He too loves sports, specifically basketball, but he also really, really loved his art classes and drawing. And so I'm going to play another video where he talks about his journey in discovering his Ikigai. And also his video is a great example of how your Ikigai can change over time. What your purpose is and passion is right now may be different when you turn 40 or have kids or, things that happen in the world can change how we want to impact the world, right? Some people's Ikigai was uncovered because we went through a global pandemic, right? And so I just want to show you how his Ikigai was discovered and then changed.
You have to be comfortable in the skin that you're in, because by you being comfortable with your dream, you allow someone else to have their dream.
Before becoming a co-founder and CEO of a Silicon Valley startup, Jason Maiden spent over a decade at Nike. He approaches design like the athletes he worked with, constantly practicing his craft, training in the off-season, and staying ready for game time. Here's how he got here.
My upbringing in Chicago informed my design craft because of being industrious, being communicative, being creative was just in the fabric and DNA of people on the South Side. Growing up, we heard stories of Michael Jordan shooting 1,000 free throws a day.
Michael, so what he's done is he's been able to get to the free throw line. He's 6 of 6.
I applied that same cadence and discipline to my craft. From freshman year all the way up until now, I typically try to average about 1,000 sketches a day. I'm constantly moving my hand to make sure that I'm in that rhythm so that when I'm called into the game like Michael, I'm already ready to go. Everyone assumes that, I succeeded on my first try to get into Nike. Unfortunately, I did not. I was rejected 3 times and it hurt, but you brought up the wound and it's so soon. And, no, I'm just kidding. But once I got there, I had the good fortune of being Nike's first African-American design intern. I worked on everything from lace tips to a shoe called the AJ-17 Mule that went to production. And by the end of my internship experience, I was given a full-time role. So I went back to CCS in Detroit where I was studying industrial design. And then I went back to fulfill that full-time role. Throughout my 14 years of being at Nike, I went from being an intern to an executive, and I did everything from branding for athletes to strategy to understanding supply chain, working on everything from soft goods to software, from footwear to firmware. I threw myself into the business fully because I wanted to learn. Along my journey in design, I had always desired to advocate for the creative voices that weren't present in the room when business decisions were being made. So I went and I applied for business school at Stanford Graduate School of Business. When I was working at Nike, I knew that I had a gift for working with athletes and working on physical product. It wasn't until I came to Stanford that I discovered that my process and how I thought was actually my true skill, and that was transferable to any industry. I've had the great fortune in my career to work with legends and icons such as Michael Jordan himself, Derek Jeter, Carmelo Anthony, Chris Paul, Eminem, Russell Westbrook. It was a tremendous experience that broadened what I believed were my opportunities in the world. Most innovation is born from unfortunate circumstances. My son, had developed a health condition that made him not love who he was. And as any father would do, you put everything on the line for your family. So I walked away from my dream job. I went back to Stanford, worked as a researcher at the D School, and found solutions to help my son. And then I fell upon this idea. Super Heroic is a company that focuses on what we call multimodal play. So it's essentially trying to reinvent the way children interact with the built environment and the world in which they live. Some of the skills that I find very applicable and helpful in the design industry is the willingness to persist in the face of ambiguity. It's critically important that we run towards those question marks because that's where we find discoveries and breakthroughs and innovations that can change the world and change society. The lesson I would tell students is that no one is expecting you to be perfect, but people expect for you to be disciplined. Discipline is what wins games.
The Chicago Bulls have won their 6th NBA championship.
Discipline is what makes the difference between someone who succeeds and someone who doesn't. Also, be patient. So many of us are pushed to succeed rapidly. There's no such thing as an overnight success. There are people who've been in motion for years and we're just seeing the end result. So be patient with yourself, be patient with your process, always stay learning, and you'll have a very fruitful, enjoyable life and career.
And Jason has had a very fruitful life and career as a product design alum. When people are passionate about their profession and it also makes a difference in the world, they get noticed across the world. So he's been very successful. He's been featured on multiple most inspiring lists, including Fast Company's 100 Most Creative People in Business and Ebony's Power 100. A really fun fact is he's actually the entity behind Jason Maiden Day in Austin, Texas, which is March 17th. So he has his own local holiday in Texas, which is crazy because he's not from Texas, right? But that's the scale of his impact, right? And he's since starting Super Heroic, has moved on to doing things in Silicon Valley on a larger scale. So just the sky is the limit, really, right? But the goal is to always be moving in the direction of things that you are passionate about, that allow you to make a difference, that you love, and also help you to sustain your life. That's the goal of figuring out your Ikigai. So let's start to work on figuring out yours. This is where that workbook can come in super handy. We're going to explore how to answer each of these 4 questions. First thing to know is in each of these 4 bubbles, I know in the examples I showed, there was only one answer for each question, but oftentimes there's going to be more than one answer, right? Most of us love more than one thing, right? There are several things that we may be passionate about that can make the world, a difference in the world. And so don't limit yourself as you're writing the answers to these questions, right? I want you to write as many things that come to mind. I see some folks on here that I'm familiar with. I know some of you are multi-passionate people, right? And so you want to explore all the ways that these questions intersect that could lead to an Ikigai. So first, let's talk about what do you love to do, right? I want you to make a list of all the things you love to do. I want you to include on that list what you do in your spare time, like your hobbies and your interests. I want you to include what your favorite classes or school groups are in school, right? There's some things that we don't like doing, and there's things where we would do even if we didn't have to, right? What are those things? What are the things that you do without being asked to do? What are the things that you love doing or loved doing or thinking about when you were a kid, right? So like Wendy Froud making dolls at 6 years old, were there things that you always just like tinkering with, trying out, right? Typically for people who come to CCS, it's something creative. They're like, I was always mashing Play-Doh, right? But think about those things. And if you're like, I don't have any particular love or interests, right? Just do a love audit. This is an exercise that I love having students do, where you find a theme and the things that you feel lightly about, right? It may not be things you're deeply passionate about, but look at your common YouTube or Instagram or Google searches, right? What are the things you're constantly looking at? Are there people that you follow on social media that inspire you? You're always looking at the content, right? What are those things that they're doing? Right? Look at all the books that you own. Are there themes, right? Do you have a genre of fantasy books, right? I know all of my books are either spirituality or self-help. I love personal growth, right? And helping people find their purpose, right? Also, if you look at those things and there are themes that come out, but they don't relate to your career, your hopeful career, that's okay. Right? I know people who are like, I just love to eat. Like, that's what I love. But they're good at photography, and past that made sense for them. For example, our food photography. They get to eat all the food and also take amazing images and get paid to do that, right? So it doesn't have to make sense now. Just write down all the things you love in that first circle, okay? Next, what are you good at, right? Now, this question can be answered a few different ways because you're still young. Right now, you're not good at all the things that you'll ever be good at in life, right? I promise you. So you can look at what your current skills and talents are. Maybe you're already very gifted creatively or with writing, right? Where are your current skills and things that you're good at? Always look at the classes that you get A's in, right? This is particularly helpful if you're not a 4.0 student. If you're a 4.0 student, you're getting A's in all your classes. But if you're a student where you're like, I'm not so great in science, but I'm great in X, Y, and Z, those are things you're good at, right? What do your friends and family members always ask you to help with? I know a lot of students who tend to lean towards CCS, their friends are always asking them to design logos or make the school play or design a t-shirt for their first robotics team or take everybody's photos at events, right? What are people always asking you to help with, right? That's a sign that you may have an inclination towards it, right? Also, think of the last few times you received praise or an award for something, and what was that thing? For example, a lot of students who lean towards art school, they're typically getting rewards or awards for their art, right? And I tell students, it doesn't matter how big or small the recognition is, whether it's, a school art show or scholastics, right? Anytime you get awarded for something, that means someone finds value in what you're doing. It means you potentially have talent in that thing. But a big place to look at to answer this question is, what do I want to become better at? Because you're at the very beginning of your career, or possibly pivoting, if you're transfer student, pivoting careers, you want to ask yourself, what do I want to become better at? right? Maybe you're not the best at inventing or photography or drawing, but it's something you know you want to become better at. That is another way of answering this portion of your Ikigai, right? So write a list of all the things you're currently good at and all the things you want to become amazing at, right? Next, this is the question that most people skip, and it's one of the most important questions on the Ikigai. I've seen so many people who they're like, I figured out my career, and they've only answered all of the other questions except for this one. And I'm like, yep, nope, you're gonna find that this is really important, right? Because your work needs to be meaningful to you, right? So what difference you want to make in the world is not relative to what other people think is important, right? This is for you personally, right? So here's some ways of asking yourself what difference I want to make in the world. First, ask yourself, if you could change 3 things about the world or society, what would you change, right? It doesn't have to be saving lives, but that could be it, right? Veronica Scott discovered that, helping people dealing with homelessness was something that mattered to her. I know for me, one thing that I would change about the world is that everybody would know what they are here to do. They would know their purpose and their path by the time they're 30. I would just end quarter life and midlife crises. That would be a thing I would change, because I feel like miserable adults make the world miserable, right? When people are unhappy, they make others unhappy. So that's something I would change, which is why I do what I do. But what would you change about the world? Also, maybe think about what social causes that already exist that you may be passionate about. For example, Black Lives Matter, Stop Asian Hate, LGBTQIA+ rights, representation in media, right? If you are a person where, you look at things that are existing in the world and you say, this isn't representative of real people, right? Maybe that's a change that you want to make in the world in content or media, right? Another place to look is using your own personal experiences of adversity. Maybe you want to solve a problem that you personally face so that others don't have to experience it. One thing you didn't hear in Veronica Scott's video is that she grew up raised by drug addicted parents. So she actually knew firsthand what it was like to be displaced, right? And so not wanting other people to have that experience possibly play a role in the difference she wanted to make, right? Or maybe you want to help others in a way that you've been helped, right? Think about a way that someone else pulled you out of adversity, and maybe you want to pay that forward. I know that's the case for me. One of my biggest role models is actually my CCS admissions counselor, Sabrina Nelson. She's an amazing person, an amazing artist, but I've seen her personally transform thousands of lives by telling people that their creativity and their voice matters. And I was like, this is something you can do. I want to make that difference in the world. I want other people to know that their creativity matters, right? But also, you can ask yourself, who do you find to be inspiring or motivational, right? Maybe they're creators that you appreciate their craft and their work, right? And you want to make a similar difference in the world and design and art, right? And culture. So these are some places to look to write and think about the difference you want to make in the world, right? And again, it doesn't have to be what other people think a difference in the world looks like. It could be just making people happy. I know so many people where they watch a Disney movie that changed their lives. And that was a difference. That was a difference in their life. Someone made that difference in their life. And maybe you want to do something similar, right? And then lastly, what can I get paid to do, right? This is a big one that scares a lot of folks away from pursuing their creative Ikigai specifically, right? A lot of us falsely assume that if what you love is art or design, there's no way to make money at it, or you can't make a decent living doing it, right? Right. And so I know so many people who are like, oh, I won't even finish the application to CCS. I won't even look at art school. I won't even, painting is a side hobby. Even though I'm deeply passionate about it, there's no way I can survive doing it. Right. And that's very unfortunate. Right. I can't speak to every industry, but I can speak to art and design. If you're interested in art and design as a path, you'll be happy to know that there are thousands upon thousands of ways to get paid using your creative skills. Right. So, I don't know how big your screen is, but in the bottom left here, I have just some of the salary ranges for the varying art and design disciplines that we offer at CCS. And when I say people are paid, I mean a livable wage, right? I'm not talking about people who are in poverty, but they have a job, right? So the average starting salaries are upwards of 40 starting to over 100K, right? 99, 100K for many of these disciplines, right? I think the lowest end of the range is 89K. Right? For some of these disciplines, right? And our average starting salary for our graduates is $51,000 to $81,000 a year. That's starting, right? And so these folks are not starving artists. right? When we talk about employment for artists and designers, in the US alone, there are nearly 700,000 businesses that employ millions of people. When you think about what this means on a global scale, that's 30 million jobs, right? In the US alone, it's over 2 million. But 30 million jobs, right? That contributes to more than $800 billion of the US economy and almost $2 trillion of the global economy, right? And according to the National Endowments of the Arts, the visual arts, right, creative culture, employ more than the performing arts and the sports industries combined, right? Working artists and designers influence every facet of life and visual culture that we experience, whether we know it or not, right? So fashion accessories designers and footwear designers, they design the shoes and the accessories we wear on a day-to-day basis. You know, product designers, they design and create the products that we use every day, but not even just the products. I mean, they design concepts and furniture, and they do influencer work. They do product research and much more, right? Concept designers design the characters and the worlds that we see in movies and in our video games. Directors, writers, visual effects artists, producers, they create the movies and TV shows that we watch, right? Creative directors and copywriters and art directors work on the commercials between those TV shows, as well as every other type of advertising we see. They create the online content we consume in media and social media. They speak on behalf of brands and social causes and celebrities and political parties, more. You know, people in entertainment arts, they create the cartoons that we love and the movies that we grew up with, the video games that we play to pass time or find joy, right? The craftspeople that are out there, right? Craftsmen, women, and folks, like they're creating the objects that shift and influence culture, but also things that are utilitarian, right? Everything from the cups and plates that we use to like large outdoor sculptural work, right? Metalsmithing that goes into the jewelry that we wear, or the textiles on our furniture, or the furniture itself, right? There's so many things that come out of the crafts disciplines, and there's careers for each and every one of those, right? I'm skipping through really quickly because it would take all day to literally talk about all the careers, and this is even a comprehensive list, right? So interior designers, they design the interiors of our hospitals, our airports, our schools, our offices, our places of worship, like residential, retail, like every space that we enter, as well as the interiors of vehicles, right? They do the color and material design work that influences the look and feel of everything we buy, from objects to vehicles, right? Communication designers, they design the logos we see, the packaging on every product we consume. Interaction designers influence every website or that we visit or app that we use. I mean, we're literally interacting with each other through a platform called Zoom. Someone had to think about the user interface of this experience, right? And how it's coded such that it works. Communication design and programming. Transportation designers, they literally imagine and design every single vehicle that gets us around this earth, right? Whether it be cars or motorcycles or boats or jets or planes, they're innovating the future of how we get around the planet through autonomous vehicle design. I mean, spacecraft, someone is designing the aesthetics of every vehicle that exists, right? Photographers shoot the images that we see on billboards and online and in magazines, whether it's commercial photography for the industry or documentary photography like Rachel, right? Or like for news outlets, fine arts photographers are making the work that we see in galleries. Speaking of galleries, like fine artists are operating galleries, they're curating for museums, they're restoring the art that we see that's been in museums for decades and centuries, right? Practicing studio artists and illustrators, they make the art that causes us to stop and think and feel, whether it be in a museum or a mural, right? These artists are art historians, they're art critics, they work in operating the art world, not just only creating the art that we see. So when you want to think about how to get paid to do something you're creatively interested in, one, know that there are a plethora of options, but I also want to talk about ways to start to explore this answer for your Ikigai. If you're like, I have no idea how to get paid for the thing I'm interested in, we'll talk about some ideas for that. First is thinking about alumni connections at colleges that you're applying to, right? So looking at the career or job pages of companies you admire, here are some of the companies our alumni are going to work at. You can see where people have gone on to work, right? That means they're getting paid. There are jobs. That's one simple thing, right? But also, if you have a college major that you're interested in, but you're not sure if it pays or how much it pays, you can look up the salary ranges for various jobs that graduates have from those majors. So for example, if you're interested in knowing like, okay, where do product design graduates go, or where do entertainment artists go and work, you can look at our website and look at Alumni Examples. They have their job titles there, or talk to a career development office at a college, right? And we'll give you lists of like, this is what people are doing, right? This is what their careers look like. And you can just take their career title and plug it into Google and find a lot of folks' salaries, right? You can find how much you make doing those different things, right? And that should help with easing some concerns about like, you know, how much does a color material artist make, or how much does a ceramicist make, right? You can learn the answers to those questions rather than assuming that there is no answer, right? But also as a high school student, it's pretty easy for you to get information, right? To start to better inform these ideas, right? So I just want to put this out here really quickly. This is a snapshot of job titles. I want you to just look at this list really quickly and see how many of these things you have no idea what they are, right? I just want you to look. Do you know what a lighter is? I promise you, is not what people use to light incense or cigarettes, right? Do you know what an armature builder does, right? Do you know what a weapon artist is? You may think you do, but do you know, right? There are so many careers that we don't know about that exist and that you may be passionate about if you had more information. And so it's your job now to start digging around the things that you're interested in to find what's out there, right? Because you may find that you didn't think you could do what you love or something that you're passionate about because you didn't know there was a career for it, right? But also you have a lot of resources. It's not a search that you have to do on your own, right? So ways to start to take these answers and start to figure out what an Ikigai could look like for you are obviously talk to a college rep, right? We've talked to, all of us combined, thousands of students. My admissions counselor, Sabrina Nelson, has been at CCS for over 25 years. She's literally helped thousands of artists pursue their path, right? So while you may think like, oh, this is what I want to do, or this is the path, she can look, like we all have insights and we can look and see like, this may be a thing, but also have you considered this, right? So talking to a college rep can help you start to plug in the answers to your Ikigai with some insights you may not have, right? But also college in general is just a great way to learn to become very good at something and connect with opportunities that allow you to work in that field, right? As a high school student, you probably can already figure out what you love to do or something adjacent to it. And you don't need help to figure out what difference you want to make in the world. College can foster answers to that question, but you can already now know what you're passionate about. But college is a great tool. It's not the only path, right? But it is a great tool to help you pursue your Ikigai. But also, this is an exercise I do with students. Ask Google. I know that sounds crazy, but you may discover careers that exist already that align with your Ikigai that you may not have known before by entering a keyword from each of the answers in your 4 Ikigai areas. And I'll give you an example of a student that I worked with in the past and what that looked like for her, because she was like, I don't know if I really want to go to art school. I mean, I like creative stuff, but I don't know. So I was like, okay, let's talk about it. So I was like, what do you love? She said she was obsessed with nail polish, nail art. She just loved, like, that's what she was looking at on Instagram. She was always trying to go get her nails done. And she also really, really, really liked social media. She was always posting on social media, following on social media. She was like, maybe I want to do social media. I don't know, right? When I asked her, what was she good at? She was always getting good grades in our English classes, not even necessarily art classes, but always getting good grades in writing. And she liked making things coordinate visually. She had a great eye for pairing colors for textiles. Like the things that people were asking her to do were like, can you help me style my outfit? Or does this look right? That's a creative skill set, right? Even she wasn't drawing, but that was her creative gift and skill, right? And then when we were talking about what difference she wants to make in the world, she just wanted people to feel beautiful, right? It wasn't like some earth-shattering difference. She's like, I want people to feel beautiful in their body. I want people of all different body types and ages to know that they can be beautiful. Perfect. Those are great answers. And then for the 4th area, right? What can I get paid to do? For Google, you just enter the word job, right? That's how you answer that question. So we put pieces from each of her answers into Google. We said nail polish, writing, beauty, and job. That's all we put, right? The first search result that came up was who names nail polishes? And we discovered through Google searching that the person who does that is a brand manager who works in a cosmetics company, or a copywriter who works in a cosmetics company. So we Googled how much those jobs make. Brand managers on average earn $79,480 a year to name nail polishes, but also to test product lines, to manage product lines, to decide what products should launch. They do copywriting, which is they write the language on packaging and in advertising. They manage the social media feeds for cosmetic companies, right? They oversee the look and feel of product lines. This student lit up. She was like, oh my God, this is all the things I want in one place. I'm like, yes. And guess what? All you had to do, all we did was Google, right? We did not become experts on any particular career path, but it's a place to start to explore, right? You can do more informed research that way versus just thinking that you know what you want to do. You can get some more insight. And so that's one way, right? It's just taking seemingly unrelated answers. So if you love food, right? You're good at drawing, you feel that the world needs more inclusivity and you want to get paid, I promise you, we can find a way, right? Because not only are there a plethora of paths that exist out there, but also there's so many paths that you can create, right? Veronica Scott with her company created an entirely new product, which created a new path for her in her life, right? You may be an innovator and create a new career path. But again, Ikigai helps you to figure out where to take your first steps. Another thing that can help you with pursuing your Ikigai is looking for mentors who are following their own Ikigai, right? Talking to people who have gotten, their creative path. They figured out their creative path. They figured out what impact they want to make, and they are, successful in that. You can ask them about their journey. You can ask advice for, what would you give advice-wise to someone who's pursuing a similar path? What would you not repeat on your path as you were pursuing your creativity? What's one thing you wish you knew in high school that you know now that helps, that could help me on a similar path, right? Mentors are a great resource for pursuing your path, right? High school counselors are also a great resource, right? For learning about opportunities to shadow, for learning about career paths, or colleges to consider, right? CCS is not the only place in the world to pursue a creative path. So your high school advisors can help you consider more options. Also, getting hands-on is a great way of testing theories that you may have about what your Ikigai can be, right? So when I say getting hands-on, I mean pre-college experiences, specifically for art students. At art and design colleges like CCS, we have pre-college summer experiences where you can live on campus or commute for 3 weeks during the summer, take college level classes in an area you're potentially interested in, and see if it's a good fit. And the way that program works at CCS is you can do this anytime between freshman and senior year. And it is equally important to know what you don't want to do as it is to know what you do want to do. So I know for me, for example, when I was a little old high school Brandy, I knew that I wanted to be creative and help people. I had no idea how to intersect those things. I was like, I do photography, I draw, I like design. I don't know. I do graphics. I don't know, right? And so I did the pre-college summer experience for transportation design because someone told me that women in automotive design get paid. I didn't realize women who are successful in creativity get paid in all the fields. So I did the pre-college summer experience for transportation design, fell in love with CCS, learned about the design process, knew that I wanted to be in this type of environment. I also learned really quickly that I did not want to draw cars for the rest of my life. I did not have to invest tuition dollars to figure that out, right? That's a great tool, right? A great resource to test your idea of your Ikigai. I know so many students are like, I want to do animation. And then they sit down to do those 30 frames. They draw in that picture over and over. And they're like, nope, I just want to do character art. I'm like, that is a different path, right? And so it's important to get hands-on to really fill out what you want to do and see if it's a good path for you, right? So with that said, I've included a worksheet at the end of your packet where you can start to brainstorm ideas for your Ikigais. I want you to start to play with seemingly unrelated combinations from all 4 areas and bring them to us. Bring them to your counseling appointments at CCS. Talk to your high school counselor and start to explore this concept, right? So with that, I'm going to pause here on talking and see if there are any questions, whether it's about Ikigai in general, about CCS, or about your own specific Ikigai that I can answer for you all. And you can feel free to put your answer in the chat box, or you can unmute yourself and ask out loud. Any questions about pursuing your Ikigai or about CCS? Any questions at all? Also, if you are interested in seeing examples of alumni from other majors, because I know today I shared examples from photography, product design, crafts, and graphic design, communication design. But if you're interested in examples of Ikigai from, fashion, from transportation design, there are examples that exist for all the programs at CCS, and we'd be happy to share those with you. All right, so I have a question for you all, since you don't have a question for me. I'd love to know in the chat box or out loud, if you want to unmute yourself, did anybody learn something new about how they may pursue their own creative path? Anybody gain anything from today's presentation?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
What I found really interesting was just how sorry, my mic is like not working very well. I found interesting how like there's these two different I guess like topics that I'm really passionate in, like one art and one just like communication, and like I didn't realize that they could be intertwined together. So I found that really interesting how like two things that are.
Oh, I think your mic went out. You said two things that are and then it went out. But yeah, art and communication actually go really well together, whether it's in communication design or advertising or creative writing. We have a creative writing concentration at CCS, right? So you think about, in most places that you see visuals outside of like just, fine art, in a lot of places that you see visuals, there's also accompanying language, right? And so there's a lot of overlap for communication skills and the visual arts, for sure. And I know one thing that's interesting is people always want to, in their mind, separate out the arts and sciences, which is so strange to me, because I'm like, there are a lot of overlaps with that. I've had students who are interested in biology and visual art, and I'm like, we have medical illustrators, we have forensic photographers, right? There are ways to really touch multiple industries using your creative skills. Again, if there's something that you're looking at with your eyes and it was not created by nature, a human had to create that, oftentimes there's somebody who's influencing a visual there, right? So if you're in a hospital, right, and you're looking at charts on the wall telling you about the body, like, the illustrator had to make the art, right? And not only did they have to make the art, they actually have to understand, you have to actually have a degree in both art and biology to be a medical illustrator, right? So there's a path where someone can pursue both of their interests. I know there was a student who was like, I'm interested in geology and crafts. Like, I'm interested in actual like studying of crystals and how things form. And there's a science to the work that's done in ceramics or glass, right? And they found a way to combine both of those passions. And not just combine them for fun, like, and also make a living, right? So yeah, it's definitely possible to combine these seemingly unrelated paths if you do the work to do so, right? Most people just write one off. They're like, no, that one won't work, right? But there is a way to combine them. I know for me, I'm super passionate about personal growth and mentoring. I've always worked with kids. Like, I was always the weirdo in middle school, like mentoring grade school kids or like making fake schools. Like, I always wanted to work with kids, but I know I didn't want to be a teacher. And I also loved art. Always loved art. I love creating art and being around artists and talking about art. My background is art direction, like critiquing art. And I found a way to do all the things that I love and also make a living. So there's definitely a way to do it. And I also freaking love my job. Any other questions? Thank you, Lucia, for that comment. Any other questions or comments?
I have a question. I'm thinking about doing interior design, but I live in like the Okemos East Lansing area, and I don't know. I was thinking about, well, my mom planted this idea in my head, and of trying to maybe get a job or maybe like just talk to somebody or like and like find someplace near here